Hello, everybody. I'm very impressed that you're all here. I mean, this is a user-centered design talk at an embedded Linux conference, and there is a quarter of the room full. I'm just amazed. Thank you so much for coming. I am Belen. I work with the Yocto Project team at Intel. My talk is called Building Tools from the Outside In, or How to Bring User-Centered Design to Embedded Linux. So because this is about user-centered design, I could just go on and on for the whole kind of 45 minutes telling you all about like human-computer interaction and usability, testing, how to measure effectiveness, efficiency, and user satisfaction in software user interfaces, and all that kind of stuff. But that would be unbelievably boring. And I am very much aware of the fact that I am the only thing that stands between you and drinks. So I've decided to do something different. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you the story of Toaster. And by now, I think that everybody more or less knows what Toaster is. It's a web-based interface to the build system that the Yocto project uses. And Toaster actually is not as scary as this at all. We just released the first version last Friday. So it's more like this, like Fisher-Price Toaster. But in any case, if I was a software developer, I guess I would start this talk about Toaster, this story about Toaster, showing you something like this. This is a diagram of the guts of Toaster, the insides of it, the technology that makes it work. And the reason why I would start a talk about Toaster showing you this if I was a software developer is because software developers tend to think about applications in the same way we hang our jeans to dry, inside out, from the technology to the outside. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're a software developer, that's 100% the right way of thinking about software applications. Because as a software developer, you have the challenge of building applications that work. And that is a pretty damn hard thing to do. So in order to tackle that challenge with any possibility of success, you need to very much focus on the core of the technology and forget a little bit about what happens outside of it. But you see, the thing is, I am not a software developer. I am an interaction designer. What? Don't worry. Being an interaction designer is not contagious, and it does not hurt. Well, sometimes it hurts a little, but now seriously, what the hell is an interaction designer? Well, to explain to you that, I have to introduce you to this guy. This venerable-looking man was, unfortunately, Bill Moggridge. Bill Moggridge was an industrial designer, and he is also the founder of a really famous industrial design company called IDEO, and he's also credited with another guy called Bill Verplank to coin the term interaction design in the 80s. And what the Bills meant by interaction design was actually quite straightforward. What they meant was the application of techniques and principles of industrial design to software. Now, what industrial designers do when they design a product is that they start by the users of that product, but from the user's goals, from what they need, from what they want. So if you're an interaction designer, when you're looking at software applications, you're supposed to start in the same way, from the users, from what they want, from what they need, from what their goals are. So you should be looking at applications from the outside, from the user, to the inside, to the technology. Because as an interaction designer, you don't have to tackle the challenge of building applications that work. That's not your responsibility. But your responsibility is to build software applications that make sense to the people who use it. So once we have cleared that out, let's talk a little bit about history. I joined the Yocto project at the end of 2011, and the first thing I did was talking to the project maintainers to understand why they wanted a graphical user interface. You know, what did they want? And this is what they told me.
I saw a demo of SUSE Studio when I was in Vancouver, and it had the guy who demoed it, helped develop it, so the demo went really well. But it did have a really nice, smooth sort of feel to it, and a lot of thought had been put into how a user interface interacted with people. We looked at it, and I was with a couple of other people from the Yocto project, and we looked at it and we thought, we dream of having a user interface that looks a bit like that.
So great. So the Yocto Project maintainers wanted a graphical user interface that was web-based. And after hearing this, to be honest, I wasn't very impressed. I thought, great, another bunch of people who saw a hammer somewhere, and now they want a hammer for themselves without even thinking if what they're dealing with is a nail. So to understand if what the Yocto project needed was a graphical user interface that was web-based, I needed to understand what was the problem with the Yocto project. I mean, what was the problem? And to do that, I, of course, did what interaction designers do, talking to users of the Yocto project. So I asked the maintainers, who should I talk to? And they inevitably pointed me to all these people that had loads of experience with embedded Linux and the Yocto project and stuff like that. And all those people with loads of experience were kind of a skeptic about this graphical user interface business. You know, they thought that it would be much more important to make sure that the documentation and formal training was in place. But in parallel, and kind of sneakily, I started to talk with a different kind of user, to people that were new to embedded Linux, to people that were new to the Yocto project, and they were trying to get their heads around it. Now, I had very different conversations with the experts in the Yocto project and the people who were new. But I asked all of them the same question. What is the problem with the Yocto project? And all of them, independently of their expertise, answered the same thing. Something like this.
And it also seems like there's really way too many permutations of configurations, which is really the beauty of the project from the beginning. But because there's so many permutations and because there's so many ways for things to go wrong, it seems like at any point in time, if I try to config my conf files in Yocto and run a build, I have about a 50 or more like 40 or 50% chance of it failing. So. That's really just been the frustration. But once it's up, the hardware works. It's pretty impressive, actually.
So there you go. The Yocto project is incredibly flexible and powerful. But with that flexibility and power comes an enormous amount of complexity. And that is the problem of the Yocto project. The enormous complexity that brings in, that makes the learning curve to adopt the Yocto project really, really hard to go through. And do you know what is really, really good at dealing with complexity in software, Well, graphical user interfaces. So it turns out that maybe a graphical user interface was a good idea. I mean, a graphical user interface is not a magic wand. It cannot turn something that is really, really complicated into something simple. That's not how things work. But there are certain tricks that graphical user interfaces can use to make the complexity much more approachable. So one of those tricks is this one, defensive design. So if you have a system where the combination of certain components are invalid, your interface should make sure that those combinations are not possible. So that's the kind of thing that graphical user interfaces can do very well, and that's the kind of thing that could really help the Yocto project. But why did it have to be web-based? I mean, there are options there. Why web-based? So the maintainers, once again, they had their own reasons to want a web-based interface.
In my development environment, I actually have machines in other rooms that I do most of my builds on because they're noisy and I don't want them near me. And if that was sharing some kind of website that I just connected in from my desktop or my laptop or something, I'd be more than happy with that.
Basically, remote access. But I had other reasons why I was partial to a web interface. The first one was reach. So one of the other things I did when I first did the Yocto project was running a really short survey between the people, between the community members. And one of the things that we asked them was, what is the computer you do in which kind of computer you do your day-to-day work? And the vast majority of people use Linux, but there were 17% that were on other platforms. And 17% might seem like a small number, until you stop for a second and think about what we are dealing with here. This is an embedded Linux-built system. How is it possible that 17% of people trying to use this thing are not using Linux? That's totally mental. So a web interface can actually help this significant minority because browsers obviously ship it with all platforms and in all form factors. But I have another reason, a little bit more selfish, to want a web interface. And the reason was that the web is an incredibly powerful toolkit to create graphical user interfaces. It imposes on you certain fundamental interaction paradigms that you absolutely have to respect, but beyond that, you can do pretty much anything you want quite easily. And there are hundreds upon hundreds of design patterns that you can use, particularly to handle and display and manage big amounts of data, which is something I knew this interface to the Yocto Project build system would need to do. So we kind of worked out that, go back, that yes, a graphical user interface could help the Yocto project, and it might be a good idea to make it web-based. But what did this interface have to do? I mean, what did it do? At that point, I was taken out from the Yocto project and put to work on something else. So the Yocto project seek for outside help. So they hired a design agency in London, and they did what interaction designers do. They went out and asked users what this interface should do. And they spoke to a whole bunch of people, and they gathered a long list of requirements that they turned into user stories. But you know what? The whole thing kind of boiled down to two big things. This interface had to allow you to configure and run your builds, and it had to tell you what happened during that build, what we call build metrics. And at that point, I came back to the Yocto project, this time for good. And they told me, oh, Evelyn, you're back. You know, we have worked out that this web-based user interface should run builds and give you build metrics, but we cannot build all this stuff at the same time, so what should we start with? And of course, I had no idea what they should start with. But I did what interaction designers do. I went out and asked the users. Now, I just didn't go out there and say, okay, what do you prefer first? Do you want the builds or you want the metrics? Because if I ask you that, you will tell me builds, of course. To get to the bottom of things, we did something a little bit different. We created these very rough mock-ups of how the functionality could look and behave. I mean, these are just images linked together. It's really, really rough stuff. This is the second version of it that we did. And what we did was showing them to users and use them as a prompt to start a deep conversation about this functionality. And what we found out was quite interesting. When it came to builds, everybody thought, of course, that being able to configure and load your builds was really, really important. However, for this functionality to be useful, it had to be kind of powerful. It needed to allow you to add and remove layers and recipes and take packages and put them in and out and all this kind of stuff, even accessing files in your build directory. And some of that made some of our users really, really nervous. Listen to this.
Personally, I don't like the idea to give so much control, because I think it's going to be a nightmare for someone supporting users. If you're going to provide this kind of feature, I would expect me to be able to disable it. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare. I don't like the idea, really.
So in order to do builds, we needed to tackle the problem of access control. And that was, kind of scary. But about the metrics stuff, oh boy, everybody loved the idea. They totally loved it. Even people who was kind of skeptical at the beginning of the conversation, no, I don't use graphical user interfaces, kind of warmed up to the whole thing when they saw what we were talking about.
No, I don't. I wouldn't use it probably. It's nice and glitzy, and it looks good if you need to show something to a manager.
Okay.
But it's just it certainly doesn't fit in my workflow. The package information one is kind of interesting. Dependencies. Okay, well that's useful. And if a particular task got an error and you could get this kind of a thing really easily, that would be nice. I could see that.
So it was a no-brainer. Forget about that building stuff. Let's do the metrics, Great. And so we did. So the next step was kind of working out which metrics in a lot of detail so that we could create a database schema that for those metrics. And after that, the developers went off and they started working on the web backend, and then they started to fiddle with the build system to cajole it to give us all these metrics. And that's the way we worked our way from the outside in, from the users and the interface that we were going to show them to the technology that was needed to make that interface possible. Now, this kind of approach to software, the user-centered design approach, the outside-in approach, borrows heavily from a few academic disciplines. One of them is human-computer interaction, and in particular, there's a technique called usability testing. Now, in academic settings, doing usability testing is kind of an involved thing. But in reality, the idea behind it is actually quite simple. You get a person that looks like might want to use your software, and you put them in front of whatever you have of that software, and it can be like mock-ups, design mock-ups linked together, or an interactive prototype, or an alpha version, it doesn't really matter. Put them in front of what you have and ask them to do something with it, and watch as they struggle to do even the simplest things. And you learn loads from that process. The other discipline that user-centered design borrows quite heavily from is a little bit more arcane. It's anthropology. And in particular, the field research technique that sets anthropology apart from all other social sciences, ethnography. Now, ethnography is all the rage right now. Boy, it's a big deal. You know, big companies hire superstar anthropologists and call them heads of global insights. This is John Chipchase. He's the head of global insights of Frog Design. So from now on, I'm no longer the interaction designer of the Yocto Project. I'm sorry, I'm the head of global insights of the Yocto Project. Isn't that cool? Now, and this agency, these guys say, they use the human sciences to solve your toughest business problems. Wow. You know, what the hell is this? You know, what's the story with this ethnography business? So to explain that to you, I need to introduce you to another person. This venerable-looking man is Professor Alan Cooper. He teaches social anthropology at the London School of Economics. And back in the 60s, he was a PhD candidate in Cambridge University. And he was getting kind of nervous because it was time for him to go to South Africa to do his field ethnographic research, but nobody had told him what he was supposed to do. So he had no idea what to do. So he went to his PhD supervisor and said, okay, I'm going to the field, and nobody has told me what am I supposed to do in this ethnography business. So can you tell me? And his supervisor looked at him and said, there's nothing to say. I have nothing to tell you. There are only two things you have to remember when you do ethnography in the field. One is whatever you do not get involved with the local women. And the other thing that he was told was, make sure that you send back regularly copies of your field diaries and notes, just in case you die. This is a true story. Now, with this, I'm not trying to tell you that that ethnography is bullshit. It's not. Ethnography is an incredibly powerful research method, as Professor Cooper would tell you himself. But what is true is that pretty much there were no really manuals on ethnography until about the 70s. So for a long, long time, people just made it up as they went. And the reason why they could do that is because the ethnographic method is based on two really basic things. So if you want to do ethnographic research, first of all, you have to spend time with your subject of study. You have to spend time with them. I mean, not like an hour here and there. Not like, a week. No. You have to spend weeks with them. You have to spend years with them. So you have to spend time with these people. And the second thing you need to do is listen. Listen to them. I mean, not just like kind of listening. No, like really listen to them. And that's it. So if you want to bring user-centered design and harness the power of the social sciences of the ethnographic method to improve your Linux tools, your embedded Linux tools, there's only two things you have to do. Speak to the people who are spending time with the people who are using your tools, and listen to them. So Yeah, boring. So you might be thinking, right, that sounds easy, but how do I do it? I mean, how do I spend time with these people and listen to them? So again, I could tell you how to, but that would be kind of boring. So I thought that I would actually show you. And to show you, I'm going to use Toaster, and I'm going to use one of you in the room. Because you see, I happen to be in a room that is a quarter full of the kind of people I have to spend time with and listen to. Only that, but for some strange circumstances, they are actually listening to me instead of me listening to them. So I say, let's put the universe right again and switch the whole thing back so I can start listening to you. But of course, I cannot listen to you all at the same time. I can only listen to one person. So to pick the right person, I have designed a very scientific recruitment exercise that I'm going to ask you to go through with me. Now, the first step is kind of tricky. It requires a lot of coordination and fine motor skills. Are you ready? What you need to do is to stand up. Everyone, come on, it doesn't work without you, so stand up. The next thing you need to do is the following. Sit down if you have contributed to Toaster. Someone should be sitting down. Who has contributed to Toaster? Thank you, Michael. There is someone else, and he's not sitting down. Sit down if you have submitted a patch for BitBake, OpenEmbedded Core, or Pocky over the past 6 months. And that rules out the maintainers. Sit down if you don't like beer. And finally, sit down if you're absolutely terrified by the idea of being listened to here today. Oh my goodness me, this is a room full of chickens. Right, so now I get to pick. And I'm going to ask Marcelo to come over. Sit down. Have a drink.
Oh, thank you.
Right, Marcelo. What we're going to do is quite easy. I'm going to show you Toaster. You can face me. I'm going to show you Toaster, and I'm going to ask you to do something with it. That's all. There are only 3 things you really need to remember, only 3 rules of the game. The first one is that this is not a test, right? We are just looking at a software application and trying to work out what works and what doesn't. So I'm going to give you something to do, but that doesn't mean that you have to finish it. If at any point you want to stop, you just have to say so. The second rule you need to remember is to be honest, even when you have to say it's not particularly nice. Now, it is true that I have worked on Toaster, but you know, it's not my baby or anything. It's just a piece of software. A piece of software that needs to be polished. But in order to be polished, I need to understand what needs polishing. And the only person who can tell me that is you. So being honest helps. And the third thing you need to remember is to narrate. You have to tell us what you're doing as you go along. And it is really easy to get distracted and go into a silent mode when you're focusing on doing something. But if you fall silent, I will probably remind you, okay, can you talk? Okay? So you have any questions?
Do I get to bring the beer?
Yes, of course. Please go ahead. Do you have any other questions? No. Okay, so I'm going to show you what you need to do. And I had a printout of this, but I forgot it. So you're going to have to remember by heart. So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. And I'm going to ask you to read it out loud so everybody can hear you. But before that, we're going to switch. I'm going to give this to Marcelo, okay? Because it's the start of the show now. Now they can hear you.
Now you can hear me.
Yes, so can you read what you need to do aloud so everybody knows?
Sure. This is the web interface to the Yocto Project build system. It allows you to look at what happened during the process of building something. You have done 2 builds. They look quite similar, but there are some differences between them. Could you explain to me what those differences might be?
Right, so I'm going to show you Toaster. Let's see if the gods of virtual machines help. Oh, no, they don't. Ah, yeah. Right, so this is toaster. Do you remember what you need to do?
Yeah, I have to tell you what is different between the two builds.
Yes, go
Okay.
for it.
Okay, let's see. There are obviously two builds. They completed at different times. And I guess I can see them somehow. Yeah. It says that's for a BeagleBond. This is Pokey. It has 3 layers, a number of tasks, and some recipes and packages. And the other one, it's also for BeagleBond, Pokey. It has 3 layers, and then there's, yeah, looks similar. Can I go back here? The output seems to be the same. There are 2 files. This one says that it has a reuse of 99%. The other one said 10%.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
Okay, so do you think you could find out what that means?
It has some help text, a little small, but the percentage of not executed tasks over the total number of tasks, which is a measure of the efficiency of your build. So, if I had to guess, I would say this one was more efficient for some reason.
Okay. So,
Uh,
do you think you could work out what the reason of efficiency is?
Okay, let me try to do that. If I'm looking at this correctly, this was the second one, the least efficient one. So something must have changed with the second one. And let's see. It says, oh, okay. This one says that 627 packages were built, and the other one says something like 6,000. So I'm going to guess that I have to look somehow at the packages that were built.
Okay.
And there's a whole bunch of them. Okay. I'm not going to go through the entire list. So if I had to guess, I would say that the configuration is somehow different.
Okay.
So is it obviously different? Okay, comparing the two things is getting difficult, but let me see. Seems to come from the same place. I mean, the layer commit here has the same hash.
Okay.
Going to guess something here is different, but at this point it's getting a little bit out of hand. I'm going back and forth between the two builds and
Okay.
trying to figure out what's different.
Okay, I'm going to give you just a tiny hint, which is something I know to do. But the difference is somehow related to the tasks.
The tasks. So let me take a
You're
look
not
at.
supposed to do this ever when you do usability testing, just to make sure.
Okay, let me see. There's a whole lot of them. So Oh, okay. Let me see, let me check that. I didn't notice that before. Okay, it says here that this one executed 4,000 tasks and the other one executed 1. So I'm going to guess that I have to take a look at what that one task is. Dual root FS executed, succeeded, and the other one, I'm going to guess, has a whole bunch of them. So if I had to guess, I would say that the second build doesn't really change anything. So it just checked and said, oh, I have nothing to do, so I'm finished. That would be it.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, yay me.
Big applause. So, how was that? How did you find us?
It's really nice to look at. The information is well organized. I missed the difference between the two builds because I was going back and forth between them. If I were to compare two, I would probably prefer to have them side by side. And to find this particular difference, I'm going to say that in this particular case, something like the total build time would have been a bigger, better hint.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there anything else, particularly something that you didn't like that much?
I have to be honest, I'm used to another kind of system which is much uglier than this one, so I really like this one.
Wondrous. I swear I'm not paying him. That's the only thing he's getting here. Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Sure.
Marcelo, for playing along. Sorry, I just need to put that on again. So that's it. We just got ourselves some user-centered design goodness. And the only thing to remember is you have to do these as early and as often as you can. We have done these in the process of building Toaster, particularly when we had a tricky problem that we weren't really sure if the design we were putting together actually worked. So the task that I gave Marcelo today is actually a real task we ran about halfway through the release cycle. This is the guy who did it, and this is his answer to the question of what's the difference between the two builds.
They were both trying to build the same thing, BusyBox. And the first one, when it was run, there was less stuff cached, so it ran a hell of a lot more. So it looked for stuff in the cache, but there wasn't as much found as there will be the next time, because next time it will be looking for this. So then the second one, there was tons and tons of stuff cached from this one, which was only 10, 20 minutes before it. So presumably not much had changed. So it could reuse a hell of a lot of stuff. So I'm assuming the next one was probably a lot quicker as well, which is, let me find out the time somewhere.
So if you were to try and figure out how much quicker, I'll apply that anyway.
There was the reuse percentage thing, but there might be... time? Oh yeah. No, it says so. It's half as quick the later one because it was using all the cache stuff.
The cache stuff, that's what we call shared state. The cache stuff, that I love that. There you go. So you just saw that. We just did some user-centered design stuff, and it wasn't hard at all. This is not rocket science. Anybody can do it. You don't need a battery of designers and anthropologists to come and like 5 project managers or anything like that. You can do this stuff yourself. If you want to bring user-centered design to your tools, you just need to do 2 things. You have to spend time with the people who use your tools, and you have to listen to them. Before I finish, all those lists of names you just saw, those were all the people that in one way or another volunteered their time to speak to me about the graphical tools of the Yocto project. And they somehow were involved in this outside-in process. So I just want to thank all of them, because without them, nothing that I do is possible. Now, if you want to join the list, if you want to volunteer to give us feedback on our tools and do things like this, like Marcelo did, just get in touch with me. You can do that on IRC, I'm Belen in IRC, or sending me an email, or any other way you want. And that's pretty much it. Those are the credits. And thank you very much for listening. And questions, I guess.
Did you give any thought to grouping users into different classes? I mean, the most common would be expert versus beginner, or people that are close to the silicon versus people that are downstream, and trying to figure out whether the interface should change for the different user types?
We have given some thought to this, although not that much. In general, we kind of split people by role. So we talk about kernel developers, we talk about system developers, and we talk about application developers, because we suspect they have different needs. But right now, we're at a point where it's so early for Toaster yet that there is nothing really that is fundamentally different between them. So I think probably this tool right now is a little bit more useful to system developers than anybody else. But we are very quickly reaching a state where we are going to be focusing very much on application developers. So we do think about this stuff. And yeah, at some point we're going to have to, we'll be creating functionality that will be more geared towards one type or another. But it's mainly by role. It's not so much experience, because experience changes. We focus much more on trying to specify, okay, what is specific to a certain role, and that's how we're splitting them up for the moment. These totally fluid things change all the time.
So I'm an open embedded guy, and I've been using this forever. Right answer, but every time you talk to someone who comes from Builder or Building RT or something, there's this fancy interface or this text interface they have. Have you talked to any of those people to understand what it is about that they like so much, and how we can use that inside of embedded in the Yocto project?
Not particularly, no. I did happen to speak to someone who has quite a lot of experience on Buildroot. And his answer was, it's because I can see the options there, It's this issue of recognition rather than recall. What happens with text interfaces is that you have to know the commands by heart. And that is really, really difficult. That makes really difficult to use the command line interface. But if graphical user interfaces or something like Buildroot, you don't need to remember anything. You just need to recognize it when you see it, because the interface shows it to you. And that sounds so silly, actually lowers the cognitive load of using software significantly. So in the case of Buildroot, that was the answer. I should probably talk to someone who has been working with WRT and see.
It's really interesting in that comparison to see how we can kind of lower that barrier to entry.
Yeah. And leverage, okay, what are others doing well that we can do
What are they doing so well in that particular part of the solution?
Yeah.
And how do we...
I completely agree, we should do that. Any other questions?
I guess so. We had to do something for like basically it's for ambulance manufacturers. It was like a touchscreen controls, right? And we were trying to get them to tell us, what do you guys want? And we got a lot of, I guess, how do you filter out what, we had divergent answers. A lot of them were like, they were obsessed about the looks like it should be skeuomorphic, and it was kind of, it was really crazy. And it was, how do you get past something like that where they're trying to give you suggestions of how to do stuff as opposed to just, do you just put something in front of them and say, does this work for you? Does it not? I mean, how do you get past something like that?
Well, by being a little bit systematic, doing like task-driven tests like this one, where you deflect the attention from things like how it looks like, it should be skeuomorphic, to does it actually work to do something that is real, something that you're going to have to do. So that's why doing it in the form of usability tests that are task-based, you have a task in mind and you bring it to them and you ask them to do it and you watch and ask questions and they try and do it. It's sometimes a really good way of getting past that. Oh, but I like it green. Yeah, that kind of a thing. So you can try that kind of approach. And then you just have to listen to them and nod and take it all in. Listen, because hidden on those comments are nuggets of wisdom that you can then take and say, okay, this is what they really mean, right? So, yeah. Any other questions?
I'm curious, have you been testing or are you planning to test not only the Toaster interface, but actually the process of like getting into Toaster and getting it running from like the documentation and like laptop?
We should totally do that. We should totally do that. There is so much stuff we need to do. One of the problems we have at the moment is that it is just me right now, although I'm getting some help soon, I hope. But it's pretty much me doing all this stuff. And I do all this kind of user engagement, user kind of research stuff, and I also do the design of the interface itself. So it's a lot of work. So sometimes I don't get to do all the stuff I'd like to do. But we should definitely test the getting up and running the thing. Absolutely. If you want to help me with that, Michael, that's...
I do have one question. I see a lot of parallels between what you're doing and what our company does. We build scientific instruments. So we're designing user interfaces. Now, some of them are, one of them is quite dated, but it's a niche market, and our customers are so used to this interface that I go out to a customer and say, okay, here's what we're thinking about doing, or what do you like, what do you not like about what we have, or run through a task. And the only input I'm able to get back is, it's the best instrument on the market and I have no improvements. And it's driving me nuts because it's a great thing, but right now, our architecture is dated back to 97. And so there's a lot that we don't have access to. We have no multi-language support. We can't leverage a lot of the technologies that out there. So I'm in this try to keep it short, but I'm in this situation where I'm having to, okay, do I reproduce the interface we have, or do I go greenfield and start from scratch? And in that kind of situation, I mean, do you have any ideas?
If it's not broken, don't try to fix it. So just leverage. I can understand what is the problem you're having, but leverage all the stuff that you have already done. You got something really, really right in that interface. So make sure whatever you do, you bring that thing that you did right to the new interface. And sometimes it's about a visual refresh, but the interaction model that you have behind it could stay the same. So, there are basically the change that you want to bring is maybe refreshing the look a little bit, but just skip the way it interacts and the way it behaves, because it seems to be working for you guys. You need to respect that as well. I mean, if your users keep on telling you, I mean, this is great, this is the best instrument in the market, please do not change it. Not change it, It
would be so much fun.
But update the technology, whatever you need to do, just make sure that you keep the good stuff from the old interface, please.
But like you're recording, the guy you recorded, he didn't like it until you showed him. He said at the outset, there's no way I want any changes. I would never use the GUI. And then, oh, well, that would be okay.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a very human fear of change.
Yes.
And they may not know what they would like until you show it.
Until you show it. That's actually very wise. So sometimes you have to be playful. Sometimes you have to take risks. What is important is that you take risks in a controlled manner. So make sure that you don't go straight ahead and build this thing without talking to your users first. Put something together that you can use to show them and get their feedback. So that's the kind of point. Is there anything else you'd like to ask? Okay. Sorry, Philip, you already asked a question.
What are some of the next high demand features all you guys working on?
Well, basically now it's building and stuff. That's something that everybody asks us. Okay, yeah, this is great, build metrics. When can I do my builds with this? So that's what we're working on for the next release, basically.
How easy is it? I probably should know how to do this already, but I don't. If I set up Toaster and expose the web server in it, so people anywhere on the internet can look at the build results.
It can be set up that way, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because that would be a very educational thing for people wanting to look at.
Yeah.
Certain out of a certain layer says, so they can browse the builds and some of the images and see a lot of the package dependencies.
So one of the ideas we are playing with is basically hooking this to BuildBot in the Yocto Project instance and make it publicly available so people can actually go and play with it and look at it and get, as you say, like an idea of what's going on behind the scenes. We might get to that in 1.7 or we might not. We don't know. We'll see.
Is there a way to preserve the data that this thing needs without having to preserve your entire build directory?
Yes, the database can be completely independent from the build directory. You can wipe the build directory and the data will still be there. So yeah, so just when you set up the tool, you have to make sure that you put the database in outside the build directory, right? So that's the thing. But yeah, absolutely. You can also point different build directories to the same database. So you can collect information from different build machines if you want to on the same database. Yeah, all that can be done. All the information is on the wiki, on the Yocto Project wiki, how to do it. Is there anything else you'd like to ask? No? Great, let's go have drinks.